Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate you being here and welcome to another WIDS regional webinar event. As I mentioned, this is another WIDS regional event. This is in conjunction with the Women in Data Science. Thank you so much for having us back this year. This event is also sponsored by CNA Corporation, a nonprofit, as well as a government contractor based in Arlington, Virginia. Today, we'll be exploring careers in data science, especially focused within the government space. We'll talk a little bit first about why we're doing this webinar today, and of course, introduce our panelists that are also employees for CNA Corporation, Dr. Rachel Tansey and Carson Parent. I am your host, Dee Brown, Talent Acquisition Lead here at CNA as well. As we take a look here, we have what is a number of fields that women pursue as undergraduates. As you can see, there's been a steady decline in STEM-related degrees that are being pursued. You see an increase in medical school, law school, physical sciences, but computer science is a decrease. Also, as you can see, over the past decade or so, there's been a steady decline amongst engineering, computer science, and so forth. And mathematics. So why is that there's a decline there is what we want to look at and hopefully encourage you to pursue these degrees. Even though there has been a steady increase in jobs of women in STEM over the past 30, 40 years or so, women make up about 50% of the workforce, and yet only 27% of STEM roles. As you see here, it's a little bit of a funnel. As women go into undergraduate, about 55% do so, but only 35% of those women pursue STEM. What's really interesting, if you look at the next box here, about 25% of those women that pursue STEM degrees actually get a career in STEM. So there's obviously a little bit of a fallout. And as you go further down into data science, it drops even more to about 15 to 22%. And when you're talking about pursuing a career in the government space, it even drops further to about 7 or 8% of women working in data science in the government space. So this brings us to feature two of our great panelists here, Dr. Rachel Tansey and Carson Parent. Dr. Rachel Tansey is a research scientist here at CNA, and she uses computational modeling, mathematical programming, and other data science techniques to support planning and decision-making related to the Navy personnel management, military healthcare, as well as operational medicine. She holds a doctorate in industrial and systems engineering and is primarily interested in creatively using data science to derive insights that lead to improved human outcomes with complex social and organizational systems. Carson is an associate research analyst here within the data science division at CNA. Before joining CNA in the summer of 2020, right at the height of the pandemic, she was completing her master's in business analytics from Wake Forest University. She also holds a bachelor in science and chemical engineering from the University of Alabama. She has provided support to our clients such as the Department of Defense and the Navy using various data techniques such as linear regression, forecasting, and simulation modeling. Thank you, Rachel and Carson, for joining us today. Really happy to have you here. I'm so excited when I get to host these events and really try to inspire women to pursue these careers in data science. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm actually going to start with you here, Rachel. Kind of tell us, how did you get here? What's been your path of getting here to CNA and pursuing a career in data science as you have?
Sure. Thanks for the introduction. So my background is in industrial and systems engineering, as Steve spoke about, something that I studied in undergrad as well as in graduate school. And I was really interested in problem solving and learning how to manage risk well in conditions of uncertainty and how to make good decisions in those conditions. And also I was really interested in understanding complexity, not necessarily simplifying complexity, but really kind of unraveling and having a good understanding of how that impacts decision making. So industrial engineering is sort of the science of problem solving, and it's in that way it's a very direct funnel into data science. It's using data to make good decisions and solve problems. That's what I studied in undergrad, as I said. And then after undergrad, I worked for a year and decided I really wanted to have a deeper understanding of this discipline. And so I went to graduate school and got a doctorate, specifically focusing in decision-making under uncertainty in the realm of healthcare policy. And so currently I'm a research scientist at CNA. I didn't really know much about CNA until I ran into some recruiters at a job fair at a conference. And at that point in my doctorate, I was really getting kind of burnt out and wanted to get in touch with kind of what was after school and kind of what was possible in the applied world, and CNA seemed like a good place to do that. And so I interned at CNA for a summer after my 4th year, and then they extended an offer and I came back full time after I graduated. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Well, thank you for sharing it with that with us. And again, thank you for being here. Carson, same question. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up at CNA.
Yeah, so thank you so much for introducing me and letting me speak today. Like Dee said, I have a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the University of Alabama. I was like most 18-year-olds. I went into college not knowing what I wanted to do, what my future was, but I knew I liked math and science, and so engineering just seemed like a good fit. And a couple of years in, I realized, oh, this really isn't what I see myself doing for the rest of my life. And so I kind of recognized more that I wanted a career where I had creativity and freedom to be creative in the way I solved problems and the way that I helped my clients or my organization. And I really wanted a place of work that had some meaning and that I was passionate about and that was making a difference either in my local society or, at large. And so when I went to get my master's in data science or in business analytics, I really fell in love with data science and what it was able to do for me and for a stakeholder or someone who's a key person in your organization. I think that it's just such a wonderful field. And I was introduced into CNA just through a handshake posting kind of, out of the blue. And I talked to my now VP, Tim Cow, and he was just phenomenal. And I loved the work. I loved the people. I fell in love with it immediately. And I think, the ability for somebody to come in and use our talents and our skills and make real impact in a military setting is just really unique. I don't think a lot of people get that opportunity. So it's a really cool way to apply data science, and using data science, I think, is just a really awesome opportunity for a lot of people.
Okay, great. And it's interesting. Both of you kind of started off in different fields, right? Somewhat touching or guiding yourself towards data science, but you both came in from an engineering background, right? And then found your way into something else, which I kind of like that, that you can always just take a different path and find your way. And both of you actually pursued internships with CNA before actually getting with CNA. So, that's always a great path to kind of get your way into a large organization and learn more, is to pursue those internships. So thank you. Very cool. I like hearing this. This is always so very interesting to me. Back to you, Rachel. Now that you've been working in the government space, working with CNA, how have you found that different from like your previous roles or organizations?
Sure. So I've had some different previous experiences that kind of run the spectrum of very applied, pure industry kind of job experience, and then very kind of pure academia experience. On the industry side, in undergrad, I interned with Continental Airlines. That was very, very, very applied work. And then I also worked in a transportation logistics company for a year after undergrad. And then on the academic side, I did 2 kind of summer research fellowships in undergrad, and then obviously over the course of my doctorate work, did a lot of academic research. And that's kind of how I think about the spectrum of experiences. I think CNA kind of lands in the middle of that, and that's really what I was looking for when I was on my job search. Because a lot of times, in a pure industry applied setting, you get a problem and it's kind of obvious how you're going to go about it, how you're going to solve it, and it's just about executing. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have kind of academia work where it can sometimes feel like you're answering a problem that nobody has asked, or you're sort of innovating for the sake of innovating. And CNA really offered that sweet spot to me where, the work is really applied in that it's, driven by real issues, but that there's, it's a research organization so that you have room and space to sort of be creative and sit with the problem and think about how to be innovative and how to be creative in how you go about solving it to deliver a quality solution. So that's really what attracted me to CNA and what felt different about my previous experiences. A couple of other things, working in the government or in national security, something that strikes me as very different is that your peers and coworkers are not usually there just because they're not there just for a job. They're usually there because they believe in the mission of the organization. They might have a little bit of an idealistic bent on how they want to approach things. And in that way, people are truly more invested, I think, than in some other contexts where people may just be doing the job for the sake of having a paycheck at the end of the pay period. So those are 2 things that kind of strike me as unique about the space that I work in now.
I mean, it's very cool to see where your work is actually applied and actually see the end result of that. And Rachel, I definitely agree with you. When you're here at CNA, being that we're in a very unique space of being a government contractor and a nonprofit, it's not always about the bottom dollar. It's about everyone being committed to the mission of the organization, which is our security of our nation. So I definitely agree with you on that aspect. Carson, same question. From your previous experiences, organizations, roles, how is that different when you're working in the government space?
Yeah, I do want to clarify. I wasn't a previous intern at CNA. I did not ever intern at CNA, just to clarify that.
About that.
I wish I had. It would have been awesome. But no, I didn't. I did do some other internships, when I was an undergrad and when I was in my master's program on a capstone project, so where I interfaced with a client. They were a small tech company. But I haven't had a lot of personal experience working in industry. This was my first real job after I finished all of my education. So, I had some of the same experience that Rachel did on a much smaller scale. But I've only really ever known working in the government space. And while there are some barriers in government, we talk about sometimes we work on classified projects. Like most of my work is on classified projects. And it's sometimes behind the buck because, new tools come out, new open source programming languages like R and Python, new packages just hit the market or just come online. And it takes us time to be able to adopt those tools and use them in a classified environment. So that's one way that, working in government space might be limited, but that doesn't mean that we don't ever catch up. It's just we're a little step behind, but we always end up getting there. But I do think what's unique about working in government space rather than, a corporate firm or in industry is you have real impact that you're able to provide with your work. I think, and I talked to friends of mine who are data scientists in industry or in a corporation space, and a lot of times they have projects and they don't even really understand the scope or the context of why they're doing it or why they're solving that problem. And sometimes they'll arrive at an answer and it goes nowhere from there. That answer isn't adopted. That doesn't help inform decision making. It's just there's work to do work. And I think with the work that we're able to do, we're working so closely with sponsors and real decision makers in the Navy and in the Department of Defense that you don't have that level of impact and that ability to influence decision making like you would in this kind of space. So I think that's a unique way that government work is really special.
Well, I appreciate your unique perspectives on this. As we mentioned earlier, being women in the data science field is a very small field. And then when you go into the government space, you're dropping down to maybe 7 or 8% of women in the government space pursuing data science. So thank you for providing that unique perspective. Now, when you talk about I know this is probably something that the audience really wants to know about is some of the projects that you've worked on recently. I will actually go to you, Rachel, on that. And can you tell us about some of the projects that you worked on recently?
Sure. So one project that I'm just recently wrapping up is developing an algorithm for the way that the Navy makes assignments to sailors. So in the military and specifically in the Navy, sailors kind of change jobs every 2 years, even though they may be obligated to stay in the service beyond that. But every 2 years, they're kind of changing jobs. And when you think about how big the Navy is, it's about 400,000 sailors. That's a lot of people that are kind of churning through a lot of different positions. And so the way that the Navy manages this, they have what are called detailers, which you can kind of think of as like HR for the Navy. They look at sailors who are just finishing their most recent 2-year assignment, and they look at the set of kind of assignments that are available to put that sailor in. And that could be, within one pay grade, within one job type. That could be, anywhere from 50 to 200 sailors and, 200 assignment possibilities, for example. So when you think about just the combinatorial aspect of that, that's a lot of different combinations that one person is supposed to be able to navigate and decide, okay, sailor A would be a really good fit for position C, for example. And that can be really difficult to do on an ad hoc basis. And when you think about kind of the cascading effects, if you assign that sailor to that position, that means that position is no longer available to any other sailor. So what my team has done is develop an algorithm to sort of optimize that and kind of speed up that process, and to also kind of add some objectivity to it. Because when you rely on humans to make these decisions, you're introducing a lot of subjectivity. Not that that's bad. There's a good insight that exists within subjectivity. And so we want to kind of capture both aspects of it, the objective part and the subjective part. And so what we did is we used mathematical programming, linear programming in particular, to build an optimization model for that process that takes into account both kind of the needs of the Navy. So, they may want assignments to be filled at a certain priority level or at a certain time point, as well as taking into account the preference of the sailor. So sailors maybe want a particular type of job or work on a particular type of platform or be in a particular location. And so the algorithm that we developed kind of takes all of that into account and kind of churns out sets of assignment slates in a really efficient manner.
You sure you don't want to come over and work for HR? This seems like very interesting work. A lot of the things that you talked about would be helpful for me to do my job, to fill roles and so forth. I found that really interesting to see how the work you do can expand across different areas, right? Different industries, and you can really kind of plug and play. So that's very, very interesting. Carson, same question for you. Can you tell us about maybe one of the recent projects that you worked on?
Yeah, so the main effort I've supported in my time since I've been at CNA and will continue to support in the future is focused on making process improvements for maintenance of our public shipyards. And so public shipyards is where we maintain our aircraft carriers and our submarines. So just like your vehicle, like your car, you have to take your car into the shop, every once in a while. If you're in a state where it has to be inspected, it has to go in for an inspection. Similarly, aircraft carriers and submarines need the same thing. They need to go in and they need to get specific work done. And sometimes, you take your car into the shop and you're just going in to get an inspection and they say, oh, your air conditioner has all these problems and blah, blah, blah. Your car will be ready on Wednesday. And you go, okay, so, I'll just wait until Wednesday. And then you come back to the mechanic and he says, oh, well, it's not going to be ready on Wednesday. It's actually going to be ready in a week. Well, that's annoying for you as an individual, but it's also really annoying when that happens to a multi-billion-dollar asset like an aircraft carrier. And it makes a lot of people really unhappy. And we have those problems now where, we say an asset like that will be ready and come out of maintenance and be able to deploy, participate in exercises, do a lot of things that asset needs to be able to do. And if we don't deliver on that date, we're months, maybe several months, sometimes even years late on getting those things out and available to the fleet. That's really problematic. And so it's our job first to help them understand through machine learning, like random forest regression modeling, how accurate you can actually be on that prediction date. Based on all of this knowledge that we know and historical performance of how you've done before, this is when you should expect that boat to come out, or that aircraft carrier, that submarine, to actually be done with that time in the shop. And then we can help them bring that number down too by specific process improvements. And we've highlighted those things using various data science techniques. We've used like high probability, high impact, specific areas for them to apply their initiatives to bring that duration down. But that's one of the main efforts that I support, and it's got a lot of high visibility, and a lot of people are really interested in how we can improve that because we have so much that relies on those things. So yes, that's one of my main efforts I work on.
I really appreciate you making the connection analogy to being a car, because I think that's something that we all can relate to for the most part. And thinking about when you're going to get your car fixed, how critical it is for you to, get to and from your job. Now, when you're talking about the Navy, it's really about that being the job, right? They can't really have, ships, and things like that, and be in the Navy if they don't have it on time. So I'm really curious. So you say you come up with all these equations to figure out when those ships would be ready. On that aspect, are you giving like a time frame? What happens when you don't meet that exact date for that client?
Yeah, so we don't have the ability to predict, like we have a crystal ball and we can tell you your future. That's not what data science is. It's not what machine learning does for you. We're here to give you a confidence interval of most likely you'll finish between this date and this date. And we have a certain level of confidence around that interval. Of course, what we're really highlighting to them is not necessarily, this is when it's going to happen. You're going to be out on this date. And if we're wrong, then we're really wrong. It's highlighting the risk to their future schedule, right? I mean, you have this ship and all of the crew and everybody that is involved in that asset in the future. They have a schedule of events they have to go through, all their training, all of their exercises, all of their deployments. They have multiple things they have to do in the next several years after they get out of that maintenance period. And we don't want to disrupt that schedule. So we're highlighting the risks to that schedule and that future activity by showing them, hey, historically, I can tell you with 80% accuracy, you're not going to be out when you want to be. And that's something that you should take into account whenever you're scheduling.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Give people a window so they won't be too disappointed if you miss that window by a couple of days. So that definitely makes sense. Now, being that you both work in the government space, I'm sure there's challenges that you come through just working in government itself, being a woman in the government space. Can you tell me a little bit more about some of the challenges that you've experienced, Carson?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the greatest challenges that I've had in my time here has been working with on a project where there were multiple stakeholders involved and multiple contractors involved. So that's pretty common when you work in government space. A lot of times the government has a project they want to do research on, and that's what we do. We provide research for them. And not only will they ask us to help, as a research entity like we are, they'll also employ other organizations that might also be the way that we are. They might be for-profit consultants, other contractors, who knows. There could be a lot of other people and players tackling the same problem that you are. And so one of my greatest challenges came with one of those situations where there were multiple hands in the bucket. And I would perform some analysis and work on something for our sponsor, who is a government POC, a government person. And then a lot of times my work would be miscommunicated or improperly credited to one of the other contractors on the project, rather than myself and for CNA to receive that credit. So that was really difficult for me. And, working in a government space, especially, in military space, it's heavily male dominated. It's usually older men as well. So I'm very much a junior whenever I walk into the room or when I'm on the phone. So it's hard to kind of assert your dominance and have a strong voice when you see something like that going, well, that's my work and you're taking credit for the things that I've provided and the analysis that I've done. So after, working with my mentors here at CNA, my leadership here at CNA, I found the best way to overcome that challenge and remedy that situation was to just be honest with the contractor I was working with and have them understand my frustration and my inability to do my job correctly and efficiently if we were going to have this tense relationship. And it all worked out really for the best. Now we have a really wonderful working relationship. We don't have those issues anymore on that project. So we were able to overcome that challenge, but it is difficult, as a young female in a very male-dominated space to be able to do that. And so that was a big challenge for me, but I'm grateful I had such wonderful support here at CNA and on that project to be able to overcome that challenge.
I think what really rings true to me from what you're saying, Carson, is really being able to find your voice in those situations, whether it's working with, male counterparts or other organizations and consultants and, owning your work, right? I think it's very important that you do speak up in any situation that you come across. But as you're starting off in your career, you really need to take that ownership. So, kudos to you for doing so. I think that's so important. Rachel, same question. Being in the government space, and I know you've had a few more years here. So tell me about some of the challenges that you've had.
Sure. I don't know if any of these challenges are specifically unique to the government space, but a few things that come to mind are, ending up in situations where opportunities don't live up to your expectations, or you feel a little bit stuck, or maybe the role that you thought that you would be in is not really what it is. I think that happens every once in a while. I think another thing, as Carson mentioned, being a young female in a really male-dominated space, in data science, you're already kind of in a male-dominated space, and specifically in the government and in the military, it just adds to that kind of sense of minority. And then kind of lastly, as Carson also alluded to, is learning to navigate a lot of competing agendas. So those are kind of three things that come to mind. And as far as how to approach them, I think actually it's you approach them all in a similar way. I think it's important to learn to trust yourself, to trust your gut, and to nurture your own confidence. Imposter syndrome is really rampant in females in male-dominated spaces. And so just being aware of that and learning how to kind of separate the objective, the facts of the situation, the facts that the way that you're specifically qualified for what you're doing, learning to separate those facts from the feelings that you might have of, maybe not being heard or not being taken seriously and all of those things. And then I think the other two really important things are it's really important to find older female mentorship, not just a couple years older, but people that have been in this space for 10, 20, 30 years, because they've seen kind of how, obviously, if they've been there that long, they've learned how to navigate this, and they've seen how how things have changed over time, and they can be a really good resource for learning how to navigate these kinds of situations. And then finally, getting your supervisor or boss or manager's buy-in is really important. And part of that is honestly be choosy, be kind of discerning when you're interviewing with companies. In some ways you're going to work for a company, and like you should definitely be aligned to the mission of the company and all of that. But more specifically in the day-to-day, you're working for a specific boss and you're working with a specific team. And it's important to kind of be confident there and be discerning and pay attention to any kind of red flags that maybe would indicate that it might not be a good fit or that you might not be well supported. Especially right now in the hiring market for data science, I think there's a lot of opportunity to be choosy and discerning in that way, and I would definitely encourage that.
Okay. I like all the kind of like a women empowerment that I'm hearing from both of you today. I agree. It's very important to seek out mentorship, and not just early on in your career, even if you're 10 years into your career or so, still, have that mentorship. I still have a mentor from 20 years ago that I still go to ask questions. And it's good to have someone that's been in your shoes that can kind of help you guide through challenging, obstacles and situations. So I definitely agree with both of you on that, and really defining what you're looking for moving forward out of your work, out of your, colleagues and so forth. So I found that really insightful. So I guess the next part would be to talk about maybe some of the classes you recommended or taken in pursuit in data science. So I'm actually going to come back to you, Rachel, first on that.
Sure. I think important classes that I took that supported, kind of a clean transition into data science are certainly some kind of class that teaches you how to navigate a database well. Learning how to write an efficient query, how to kind of navigate a lot of different data sets that are related in a lot of different ways. That's always going to be useful. As well as a programming class of some sort. You might not use that exact language later on in your career, but understanding like the intuition behind how to program, how to write a script is really going to be key in pretty much any data science job that you'll have. And then something solid in the realm of statistics and probability. And then finally, I think it's really important to find a particular part of data science that is really interesting to you and pursue that. Something that you just find weird or cool or fascinating. And that helps kind of set you aside from other generic data scientists. And also, it's important to pursue something that's like specifically interesting to you. So that's what I would say.
Well, they say if it's something that you enjoy, it's never work, right? So I think that aspect is really important to make sure that you enjoy the area that you're looking at. Last year, we had a panelist, Yulia Tishik, talk about a person that had a great interest in basketball, and somehow they were able to apply data science in basketball. And that was a really interesting aspect of pursuing data science. So you can make it fun, and you should make it fun for yourself. So yeah, I definitely agree. Carson, same question. What classes would you recommend or have taken in the past to pursue a career in data science?
Yeah, so I agree with all the classes that Rachel said. I think those are all fundamental and really important. I second the statistics. I think that's probably the most fundamental thing you need, just so that, you can find code on the internet to run any machine learning model, anything like that. You can find all of that already written for you, and you can plug it in and play it. But to really understand the output and what you're doing, I think you just need that fundamental understanding to interpret your model and how it's doing. I think the open source languages like R, Python, I don't think you'll ever really not be learning those things. So take classes, yes, but you can also do online subscription things. You can just watch YouTube videos to learn those types of languages because they come out with new packages monthly for those languages. So you'll always be learning tools with those. I learn things every day with R. That's my language of choice. And then I think the best class I took in my master's degree was one solely focused on communicating results. It was called Analytics in the Boardroom. But it doesn't have to be an analytics-based class. It can be a public speaking. It can be, any kind of class that you can take that's solely focused on you presenting your findings or presenting anything. I think is so valuable and important because, your analysis and your ability to conduct data science research is only as valuable as your way to communicate it. So if you can't deliver your message and tell your narrative to your decision maker in a way to where they can understand it, adopt it, and implement it, then it will die. It won't go anywhere from there. So that piece is so important, and most data science programs don't put any emphasis on that skill set at all. And I think that the best thing you can do for yourself is really find a program or find a way for you to expand that skill set because it is the most valuable, and it's something that most data scientists don't have.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself there. You think in 2022 I would get that down by now. So yeah, I definitely agree, Carson. I don't think there's never been a time that I haven't shared with a candidate, like communication is key. Being able to communicate technical things to non-technical people is important. When you're talking to a client, they may not understand what the data modeling is. They may see the picture and say, oh, okay, I get it, or linear regression and thinking about that. So you really need to think about who's your audience, right? And how are you able to communicate what those needs are? So thank you for that added aspect, because I always think the intangible always goes with that technical piece, right? So now when we talk about, we talked about some of the coding and scripting languages, Rachel, you brought up earlier. What are some data science tools you feel like are useful for success? And we already talked about some of the intangible things, but what do you think are really, geared towards helping you be successful here?
Yeah, I think, I really appreciated when I was an undergrad, somebody told me to learn R because it's open source and I'll always be able to take that with me to any company, no matter whether they're willing or not to fund whatever, software package I'm typically used to. So I think certainly having a solid foundation and being familiar with the public and open source scripting language like R or Python is really important. I honestly, part of being successful with that is just being really good at Googling things too, because like Carson said, there's code for anything on the internet, but you have to know how to find it, and that can often be the challenge. And so just kind of, if you're running into a problem, maybe try to figure it out online before you go to your professor or you go to a classmate, and because that's a valuable skill set just to be able to efficiently find the answer to the thing that you're asking. Because a lot of times it's going to be really niche, and you have to have that one particular word right in order to find what you're looking for. I'll kind of reiterate a lot of things Carson said. Being able to explain things clearly, simply, concisely is really going to make the difference in how your work is received. I think as kind of technical or analytical people, we can get kind of attached to the really small details and the little tweaks that you made to your model, and kind of get stuck in looking at the trees, when really what your client cares for is they really don't care about the particular trees that you've just spent months of your life analyzing. So just being able to understand that and to see where your client is coming from, and to kind of cater your presentation and your voice to that. Those things are all really, really important.
Well, I can tell you Google is my friend. If anything, go-to is Google when I can't find the answer. So I can definitely echo on that. And so you mentioned working with R is something that you're always going to be able to use. Carson, do you have anything to add as far as tools that will help you really be successful in data science?
Yeah, I echo everything Rachel brought up, all those languages, all those tools. I think the hot ticket item right now is like dashboarding and being able to use tools like that, Power BI, Tableau, Click. Those are really, great for data scientists because it makes data like tangible for the user, like they can see it in real time, and that's something that we haven't had a whole lot of before. So I think, if you can get your hands on some kind of dashboarding software, I know Tableau has like a free trial, but then you have to pay for it. I'm not sure about Power BI, but I'm sure there's other like free things you can do. But experience making dashboards that are both visually pleasing and aesthetically pleasing, but also make sense and tell a story is a really good skill to have in the future. I think just making good slides too. We make a lot of briefs and we make a lot of slides. And so being able to make a good slide that doesn't have too much information, but also isn't, too thin on information is, that's a good skill set to have too. And then I think lastly, the most important part of being a data scientist is finding that why, and being able to search for, well, this doesn't make any sense to me, or this correlation and this whatever relationship shouldn't be there. Well, it's there for a reason. You need to figure out why it's happening. And that's what sets apart a mediocre data scientist to one that's really wonderful and has a lot of impact. So I think that's an intangible tool that you just have to hone in on, is that constant curiosity and being able to search for those answers that other people haven't been able to find.
I definitely agree with a lot of aspects of that, Carson. In CNA or any role I've come across, a big thing is having that sense of curiosity, thinking about the problem. If you already see it's working or situations working efficiently, how do you come up with an alternate solution to maybe even make it work better? Thinking outside the box and different approaches is always just very helpful. I definitely agree on that aspect. So this is very important. And I noticed you can't really get away from the public speaking part. You mentioned doing presentations and things like that. So if anyone is really hesitant on the public speaking, work on it. Just work on it every day and you'll eventually, get to that point. So thank you both, Rachel and Carson, for sharing with us today. What I want to do now is, of course, open up to questions from our audience. Okay. So thank you everyone for sitting through our webinar and panel today. We really appreciate it. So I have a question today, and I'm going to guide it towards you panelists here. What is being done to improve teaching of requisite courses like calculus? Better teaching would help close the gap. So I'm going to start with you, Carson.
Yeah, so it's been a minute since I took calculus and those sorts of classes, like 6 years ago or something now. So my experience in college 6 years ago and the time that I was taking those sorts of fundamental classes in math and science, I thought that gap was pretty well closed. I thought that there was a lot of exposure and inclusion for women, young women, diverse candidates. I know I went to primarily a very, very Southern school, and in engineering, especially my engineering, it was maybe 20% female. And so, yes, I was underrepresented, especially in those types of classes. Yes, my gender was underrepresented, but I think that the teaching of those things, I don't think there was any gap really in my exposure, my learning opportunity for those fundamental courses.
Same question to you, Rachel.
I had maybe a little bit different experience, and this was a little bit longer ago, 10 years ago. But yeah, I remember my Calculus 1 teacher was great. My Cal 2 teacher, I withdrew because it was a horrible experience. And I got kind of like scarred by that a little bit. But what I ended up doing is I just did a lot of homework on who the great Cal 2 teacher was in the university. And usually if you're a big university, you've got choices to choose from. And so, even if that means, if you encounter a situation where you're struggling a little bit, again, this comes back to, something maybe not living up to what you thought, and you have opportunities to take it with a different professor, do that. If it's not going to like push your graduation date by a year or something like that, it's okay to say, hey, you know what, this is not a good match and I'm going to take this next semester with somebody else. The other thing that I'd recommend is just kind of seeking out your own kind of resources. I think differential equations I learned primarily on Khan Academy online. You aren't necessarily only limited to the professor that you have available to you. There's a lot of resources out there to kind of pick up things on your own. I do recommend Khan Academy or a Coursera class or something like that to kind of fill in the gaps if you're running into that issue. And yeah, a lot of this comes back to similar things that I talked about, is kind of having somebody that's in your corner. So if you have an advisor, try to nurture that relationship and ask for their advice if you can. And if not, talk to your peers. If there's a problem like that, it's not a unique experience to you. And so usually there's somebody out there that made it through. Find those people, figure out what they did.
And I think from, me being on the outside of this, because I haven't taken calculus since high school even. And so, really understanding what that gap is. When you're saying closing the gap, is it the gap in teachers being represented in STEM that are female? Is it the students that are taking that class? Is it availability of those classes? Things like that would be also helpful, just kind of knowing a little bit more to that aspect. So I know that person wrote us, so if you have any follow-up questions or want to add to it, please feel free. So we're going to move on to the next question. This person wrote, how do you approach the situation where a colleague tries to mansplain a data concept to you? I see both of you, Carson and Rachel, are smiling about that. I think I've gotten this in, my field in HR as well. So I'm going to give this to you, and then hopefully you can answer that first, starting off with you, Carson.
Yeah, so I think every professional woman has at some point felt this, like mansplaining, like that construct. I think the best thing that I've found to do is just gently remind that individual that you are their colleague and that you are educated and you have an understanding of what this concept is. And you can remind them that both in that moment and then also in the work that you provide. I think so often women feel like we have to, overcompensate because we are at a disadvantage, we are underrepresented, we do have such an uphill battle, but I try to focus on more, what am I capable of doing and how can I let my work speak for itself instead of let me speak for myself, because I find that I am better off doing it that way. And just put in the work and let your work speak for you. That's how I think I've gotten to most of my male colleagues or counterparts in other organizations that I've had to work across with. I think most of it is just whenever I show them how competent I really am and how valuable my mind is to them, then I no longer am mansplained to. I'm inquired about for my value and for my contribution. So that's my best advice for that.
Rachel?
Yeah, pretty similar. I think just kind of, again, separating the facts of the situation from your feelings. So maybe that person mansplaining is making you feel like, oh, maybe I'm not getting something here. But like understanding, no, wait, like I know what I'm talking about. I maybe even know more about this than this person does. And kind of standing in that and not being afraid to say, oh, I actually wasn't done speaking. And that can be difficult to do elegantly, and that takes practice. I had a friend that recently told me, on Zoom and stuff, she would say like, "Oh, I'm sorry, am I muted?" Whenever she gets interrupted, like, don't be afraid to do that,
I like that aspect. Am I muted? I like that. I'm going to have to try that in another meeting if I ever come across that again. That's funny. I like that. If anything, I always say, as you said, Carson, this happens with any professional women, even though HR is like very dominated by women in general, you still come across people, clients that will try to tell you otherwise how to do your job or anything like that. My go-to phrases have always been, I'm aware. Like when somebody interrupts and tries to tell me something, I'm like, I'm aware, and then try to re-guide the conversation back to my point, right? I'm aware. Where I was going with this was X, and really try to get them back on the page and where I am, and then guide the conversation and take charge. So I like to do that, and I feel like that's a respectful way of saying like, hey, don't explain it to me, but just say like, I'm aware, moving on, this is where I was trying to go with this conversation. And I think that helps kind of guide it back and puts you back in the driver's seat. So thank you for that.
I would also say, sorry,
what'd you say?
I would also say that it really depends on, whoever's asking this question. It depends on the context a little bit too. If you're talking about somebody that you work with, a peer, or somebody that you work with on a regular basis, there's a lot more room to do that without kind of breaking anything or stepping on any toes too badly. If this is like a client, that can be a little trickier to navigate. And I think that comes back to being, it being really important for you to have a manager who has your back and somebody that has insight on how to navigate that situation, because the stakes are different in different situations for sure. And that's the reality of it.
Yeah. And that goes back to the mentorship and the buy-in that you were talking about earlier, Rachel, to really have that backup to go into those difficult situations and navigate them. So thank you for that. We have another question. This person is currently a software engineer and was asking if they need a PhD or master's. They have a post-degree in machine learning and some experience or some on-the-job experience. I'm actually going to take this first, if you don't mind. So as far as roles, with CNA itself, it depends on the role that you're pursuing. All of our roles list if it's a bachelor's, master's, or PhD that's required. So really think about what the job description is saying and how your experience matches up against those roles. I wouldn't say every single role needs a PhD or a master's. It just depends on what the client is needing, because that's how we work around our job descriptions, right? I'll kick this over to you, Carson, as far as like needing a certain level of education to pursue a role.
Yeah. So I'm in a minority at CNA. I don't have a PhD. That's one of those things that drew me to CNA, is how incredibly smart people work here and how I can learn from them on the job. But I only have a master's degree and a bachelor's. I use my master's degree as an opportunity for me to specialize in a field that I had no experience in. I had no education in data science or anything related to it, really, because I was a chemical engineer. There's a little crossover with those two things. So I use that as an opportunity to sharpen my skills and gain that skill set, so I could enter the workforce as a data scientist and not as an engineer. I tell most people, if you're able to get something else other than a bachelor's degree, I think you should. Nowadays, I think, because everybody has a bachelor's degree, it seems like, so you want something that sets you apart. But that doesn't mean you have to. Like you said, I think it'll say pretty explicitly what the requirements are for specific jobs. So if like CNA is a place you want to be, then I would recommend, at least a master's degree, so that you can move up and have all the opportunities that you want. Other jobs might not require it. I know like Google maybe doesn't even require a bachelor's degree, but that's a little different. But so I think that's it's very subjective to like what role you're looking for, what company you're looking for, but also, what experience do you have? So that's just my take on it.
Okay.
I'll just say, as somebody that did get a doctorate, I would never recommend that somebody get a PhD as a means to an end. I think you should get a PhD if you're really interested in that subject area, if you're really wanting to kind of learn more about the bleeding edge of that research area, and you're just genuinely curious, because PhD programs are very self-driven. They're not very structured. You have to, it's a lot of work to figure out something that hasn't been done before, and to find that, and for it to be something that you care about. And they're long. I took 6 years for mine. Nobody should do that just to check a box for a job that they want. The master's degree, sure, do that. A business degree, even medical school or law school, those are things that, are worth doing to check a box for the job that you want, not a PhD. That's a pretty strong stance, but I do stand by it.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your perspectives, and definitely I'm sure the audience will take that to heart as they're pursuing new opportunities. So I have one more question. This person's asking, what is or are the most important things you need or want from your manager? Go ahead, Carson. You can go ahead and answer that.
Okay. Let's see. When I joined CNA, or when I was on the job market and I was looking for a manager and I was looking for a team, I really just wanted somebody who would champion me and would see the value in me and see the potential in me and want me to not only succeed, but grow and become a better data scientist, become a better professional. When I joined CNA, we had a different VP at the time, and she was phenomenal. I envied her accomplishments, and I really wanted to emulate her as I grew and as I became, more of a professional woman. So I saw the future I wanted in her, and I wanted to learn from her. And same goes for my current VP and my current manager. They have so many great qualities that that's what I want to be that one day. And I tell myself that every day, I really enjoyed the way they did this, or they handled this. I want to be able to do that. And so I think finding like managers and people when you interview, think about, how are they answering questions? How are they talking to me? Is that the way I want to be when I'm in their position? Because one day you'll get there, but you want to learn from the best. And that's how I think, I want to learn and grow and be better under the best people so I can have those qualities whenever I'm doing this one day for someone underneath me. And I think one of the best things when I was in my master's, one of my advisors was like, just do the elevator test. If you were stuck on an elevator with that person, would you want to claw your way out, or could you stand being in there with them? And I can say I would not want to claw my way out with any of the people I work with. So that was a big thing for me too.
Rachel, same question.
A few things come to mind. I think to echo what Carson said, definitely try to get a sense of whether this person is actually invested in their team, and whether they're interested in helping you grow and helping you learn things, and to sort of be able to, show up for you and come to bat for you. That's really important. That can be hard to gauge in an interview. I would say that internships are a great way to gauge that. In a lot of ways, that's a 3-month interview, which can be a little intimidating for you, but on the other hand, you're also interviewing the company. You're also evaluating whether you're a good fit there. I think specifically as a woman, I like to look at, is their team all men, and why is that? That's not a make or break kind of thing, but it's information to have. If there are women on their team, I would try to make sure to have a conversation with that person before you accept a job offer, just to get a sense of what their experience is, which, I would say definitely interview with your team members as well before you take any job. But specifically, I would look for, a woman who's worked with this person. And then the other thing that I would look at is, did this person sort of get to a manager role just because that's what you do to get promoted, or are they actually interested in managing people? Because those are very different experiences. To work for somebody that just happens to be in a manager role because it was the next promotion level up versus somebody that really wanted to manage people and specifically pursued that. So those are things that I would think about.
I think those are both very insightful things. I always want to add that when you're looking at a manager, not look at a manager, but look at a people person or people manager or people mentor. That's really the people that are going to help you grow, challenge you, push you forward. Are they going to mentor you throughout challenging situations, career paths, classes you should take, certifications, anything like that, is also an aspect that you should probably look for in somebody that is going to be supervising you. So I know we had a few more questions. However, we're coming up on time here. Is there any final words, Carson, Rachel, that you have to add? No, you pretty much said it all, right? So if anyone has any further questions for Carson, Rachel, or myself, you can email inquiryjobs directly, and someone in HR will receive that email. Also, I provided all of our LinkedIn sites here, or links, that if you want to reach out to Carson and Rachel directly, connect with them, get more insight, feel free to do so. If anything, we're really excited to be here. We're happy that you were able to join us today. Special thanks to you, Carson and Rachel, to really providing all the insight, being in this unique space of working in government, being a woman, working in data science. I hope, if anything, for our audience today, this has been helpful and you're interested in moving forward and pursuing that career.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And everybody, have a great day. Like I said, email us, LinkedIn us if you have any other questions and want to connect. We appreciate your time. Have a great day.